You know how we've talked about the fact that Snicket is in a tough position because he's already set it up for him to only use 13 chapters. He's put that own constraint on himself that sometimes it's like, I don't know if 13 was the right number of chapters for this book, but he's already set it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't you think that maybe there could be a solution where he could just come up with, I don't know, a chapter that's just called Not a Chapter?
Hmm. Well, that is interesting. He could even do like 2, 3, 7 of them in a book.
Sure, why not, right? It's a
Just have
perfect
them be,
solution.
yeah, just have like, have it be like a preface to a chapter. Why not?
Exactly. You could
Just like
even do
a
like
couple pages or something.
chapter 0, chapter
Mhm.
-1.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. All kinds
Sounds
of things
great.
like that. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it wasn't a problem after all.
Right. Yeah, why didn't we think of that before?
I don't know. Hello and welcome to Woeful Wednesdays. Nathan reads a series of unfortunate events. Ignore the tattoo. My name is Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
If you are new to the series, I am reading this series for the very first time. Tyler has read it multiple times, including as a middle grade reader, and we are producing 3 videos for each book. We're doing weekly videos, so each book is split up into 3 different parts, chapters 1 to 4, 5 to 8, and then 9 to 13. And we are specifically looking at book the 12th. We're almost there. In fact, it is the penultimate book in the series, titled
Yes.
The Penultimate Peril.
Yeah, which is a great title, honestly.
Yeah, it is. It is. I thought about, I don't know, maybe we'll still end up doing it, but just for a sponsor or something, we could just have like a giant pen. Just Pen
Ooh.
Ultimate.
Ah, that sounds great.
I don't know if that product exists, but maybe that'll show up on the next podcast.
I hope so. But do we have any other, do we have a sponsor for this week's episode?
We do. So, our sponsor for this week is Hotel Denouement. Are you tired of being treated like a human being at hotels? With dignity and respect, and where people don't flip you with a giant spatula when you're out lounging by the pool, right? Who wants any of that? Well, why not get treated the way you deserve to be treated, like a well used library book? At Hotel Denouement, you're just a Dewey Decimal number to us. Be
Ooh.
reduced to your most essentialist traits, and that's absolutely how they're going to treat you. It is, I don't know why they went with the Dewey Decimal System when they're ignoring the far superior Library of Congress system. I'm not trying to get librarians all upset here, but
Yeah, no, I mean, one of them definitely has a bit more range than the other.
yeah, I think so. But
Um,
yeah, Hotel Denouement, you want to check in and check out and avoid those late fees.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, so thankful to have them as a sponsor. I know whenever I'm booking hotels, they never mention being flipped over by a spatula or anything like that.
Yeah,
They don't let me know what room number I'm going to be in before I get there. It's
no,
it's so irritating. They don't even want any personal information about me really, so that they can
right,
figure out what room to place me in. How
exactly.
do they how do they organize it?
Right. They will, that should be part of the check-in process. What do you do for a
Yeah,
living? Okay, we're going to put you in this section.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Hotel Denouement. But yeah, speaking of Hotel Denouement, I don't know. I think it's next to Motel Climax, is it not? But I think that one's just hourly. Pretty sure. Just saying that it's part of a plot graph.
Right, yes.
I'm actually surprised that he doesn't have that in these books, considering some
It's
of the stuff
true.
he's included.
That's true. Oh man, that would be really, really clever and so up his alley.
Yes, it would be. I'm surprised, unless you forgot and it is in here somewhere.
I don't, yeah, I certainly don't remember it. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get into the discussion. All right, I hope you enjoy. Ignore the tattoo! Nathan unfortunately reads a series of unfortunate events at an unfortunate age, which in this case is being used to indicate that he is entirely too old to be reading this for the first time. All right, so we are looking at Book the 12th, The Penultimate Peril, specifically chapters 1 to 4, and I have got plot summary duty for the week. So Kit, Knight Rider Snicket, drops the kids off in front of Hotel Denouement.
Mhm.
They basically travel around in her crazy taxi, and she does a spinneroo and goes through the bushes. And then it's like, hey, I'm going to drop you guys off, and you're going to go into the Hotel Denouement because we've got this conference, and some people check in early. She gives them all of this advice, right?
Yeah.
Saying, some of them, like it's the conference for VFD, it's the last safe place in the world. But since the schism, then all of the, rogue or evil members of or former members of VFD, they're going to be checking into the hotel as well. And you've got to be on the lookout for who you can trust and who you can't trust and who's good, who's villainous.
Hmm.
And the way you're going to do this is you're going to go in incognito. So I've already arranged for you to go in as concierges, and you're also going to be flaneurs, right?
Hmm.
And so, which is just, it's a French word which means to loiter or to stroll and to observe. And I want to talk a little bit more about it once we get into the book.
Okay.
But basically, it's just their job to then observe and try to figure out what's going on. And she said that their boss, once they go into the hotel,
Yeah.
he's got an evil twin brother. What are the two names? I can't
Uh,
remember them.
Frank and Ernest, is it?
Yeah, that I think that's it.
Uh, it starts with an E. I remember that much.
Yeah, Ernest, you got it.
Yeah.
So Frank slash Ernest is
Mm.
there, and it seems like they're interacting with both of them, but they never really know when they're interacting with one or the other.
Yeah.
And so one of them they can trust, the other one they can't.
Hmm.
And then they ultimately take on their job as attendants at the concierge desk, where you have bells ringing in different parts of the hotel, and they have to then go attend to these different things. And along the way, they learn that the hotel itself is organized, because it's got all these crazy numbers all over the place. It is organized by the Dewey Decimal System, where the hotel is effectively a giant library,
Right.
uh,
Yep.
with just different sections and guests who are all being sorted by the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah. Presumably 999 different points of interest in this hotel.
Yep.
Because sometimes then it's like a bench is one of the numbers, and other times then it's a full room. So yeah, not quite sure how that gets organized. Oh, sorry, 1,000 because there is also, of course, the rooftop. What is it called? The rooftop sunroom or something?
Yeah. I
Mm,
forget exactly what it is called, but yeah, the rooftop sun area.
yeah.
So anyway, so they end up like going off to attend to this, and Snicket then tells us, and I want to talk about this when we get to this actual part, but in the not a chapter, then he
Mhm.
says, look, since they're splitting up and they're going off in their separate ways, I've just organized this where we're going to have a chapter with Violet and then with Klaus and with Sunny, but it doesn't
Mhm.
matter what order you read it in. As far as the sequential nature of the books, that's not going to factor in for the next few chapters. So you can do whatever you want, or better yet, you can just not read the book.
Right.
And so then we follow Violet if we're going to go along with this. So we just continue on in chapter 4, and we've already made the commitment that we're going to continue on in chapter 4. She goes up to the roof.
Yeah,
We've
I
got
know. I wish that I had remembered that sooner so that we could have advised people to read chapters 1 to 3 and then 7 or something.
right, right.
Or
Uh,
6, I guess, whatever.
it's fine. So Violet ends up going up to the rooftop sunbathing salon,
Ah, yes.
and of course you've got Esme who's up there because I guess it's very in to be sunbathing, and she's got her sinoculars on.
Right.
And you've got Carmelita Spats, and presumably, I don't remember Count Olaf making an appearance, but County, according to Carmelita, is there. So,
Yeah, somewhere. He should be around somewhere, but yeah, we don't see him.
right.
Thing. So
And ultimately, Carmelita requests a harpoon. So Violet has to then go and
a
find a
harpoon
harpoon.
gun.
Yeah, sorry, a harpoon gun, not just a
Yeah.
harpoon, but a harpoon
Yeah.
gun,
Uh,
presumably with a harpoon. on it.
Right.
I mean, I guess that'd be the safest thing. Just bring her a harpoon gun, but no
I
harpoon.
was thinking about that too.
It's like, you requested a harpoon gun. You didn't say it had to be loaded.
Yeah. Just to buy yourself a little bit more time.
Right. And it's like, oh, I'll be right back. I'll go find a harpoon. You should have said that to begin with.
Yeah. And then she'll be like, just bring back one, and then have her be like, I might need more than one. Oh, okay,
Right.
I'll go find you another one.
Exactly. Yeah, one, but no rope. It's like, I need a
Right.
rope. Well, you didn't say that.
Yeah, there are lots of ways that you could make that a lot slower.
Exactly. Um, all right, so I think I've mostly covered the plot because she then goes and talks to Frank slash Ernest,
Hmm.
who's very happy that she's getting a harpoon gun for Carmelita.
Yeah, it's. I'm trying to remember now. He definitely says something that could be interpreted two different ways, where it's, do you really think it's best to bring a harpoon gun uh, to a little girl? I'm trying to see where that is exactly, because I definitely.
It's on page 94. Then he says, "Are you
Okay.
sure a harpoon gun should be given to a young girl on the roof?" Violet did not know how to answer him, but fortunately, this appeared to be one of the times when silence is in fact golden, because at her silence, Frank or Ernest gave the eldest Baudelaire another smile, and then turned on his heel, a phrase here which means turned around in a somewhat fancy manner, and beckoned Violet to follow him to a far corner of the lobby, where she saw a small door marked 121, and then it goes beyond that. But it seems he gives a smile, so I'm saying he seems pleased. That's why I said that he's pleased. Smile.
Right.
It's like, do you
Yeah.
really think it should be given to a young girl? She doesn't say anything. He's like, okay, presumably that's good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah. So
It's my first time reading it, so I'm interpreting it how Snicket wants me to interpret it. I'm pretty sure. If
yeah.
there's some twist in the story that you know of, I don't know of it.
No, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I don't remember. Frank and Ernest. I love that play between those two, where you're never sure which one's which. I think it works really, really well.
And you get like what's going on with the names.
Yes, that they're both, very like they both mean if you're looking at them as words in and of themselves instead of as names. To be very frank with someone or to be very earnest with them.
Yes, they
And
both
it's
mean to tell the
yeah,
truth,
right.
but one of them is definitely lying.
Yeah.
So it's clever.
Yeah. Um, yeah. All right. Well, I suppose we shall hop into our notes then.
Yep. Why don't you go
Um,
first with chapter one?
sure. All right. So my first note is on page 7. And on page 7, and we have, yeah, just right at the very top of the page. Actually, I'll start from the bottom of page 6. The Schism VFD was once a united group of volunteers trying to extinguish fires, both literally and figuratively. So that's just, clarification as to what that actually does mean. That, volunteer fire department is not just a literal term, which we had already sort of assumed, but it's good to see it spelled out here.
Mm-hmm.
And we get a lot of that in at least, while Kit is around. Where she's just kind of explaining truths about their lives and about VFD,
Yes.
which is good.
Yes.
It's good that we're getting some resolutions here.
I suppose so. I feel like they could have come in more naturally at various points instead
Mhm.
of, a character just didn't answer. We have no time for me to give you that answer,
Right.
but we have time for me to say I can't say 3 words.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just you're frustrated the entire time, and then when the answers finally come, then it's like, I don't care anymore.
Right.
I think there's two different ways of reacting. You're either like, thank you, finally, or just like, I'm past it. I've moved on.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. All right, my next note is on page 15, 14 into 15. Uh, Bottom of 14, deciding whether or not to trust a person is like deciding whether or not to climb a tree, because you might get a wonderful view from the highest branch, or you might simply get covered in sap. And for this reason, many people choose to spend their time alone and indoors, where it is harder to get a splinter. So just once again, he is encouraging people to stay inside
Good point.
and, not
I'm
get
s-
any exercise.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that he says like the worst thing that'll happen when you're climbing a tree is like you'll get sap on you and get a splinter. I'm like, or you'll die, you'll break your
Right.
neck, you'll fall out of a tree. Uh,
Yeah,
it's
I know.
surprising for a writer who's pretty dark. Like,
Yeah, I like started reading it and I was like, oh, this is going to be, very opposed to climbing a tree. But then it's like, oh, that's not that bad. And then he just
yeah,
gives you the alternative of, you can just stay indoors. I'm like, okay, but that seems a little toned down from what you have been saying of
agreed.
you should avoid exercise at all costs.
Right, agreed.
And yeah, so those are my only notes for chapter one.
No kidding. Okay. Um,
I think
at the
so.
very beginning of chapter one on page one, it's interesting because you have this reference to a ripple effect or to the butterfly effect,
Hmm.
and so I just want to read a portion of that. This is from the very beginning of the book. Certain people have said that the world is like a calm pond, and that any time a person does even the smallest thing, it is as if a stone has been dropped into the pond, spreading circles of ripples further and further out until the entire world has been changed by one tiny action. If this is true, then the book you're reading now is the perfect thing to drop into a pond, and then he continues on from there. But I wonder, because like he does say certain people have said that the world is like a calm pond, and that he's saying this idea of the ripple effect or the butterfly effect, that even the smallest actions can cause who knows what, like unknown consequences of various significances, you know what I
Hmm.
mean, depending on what the action is. But I'm wondering about the connection to destiny, because this is about cause and effect.
Right.
And he's already established that this universe operates
Hmm.
by fate slash destiny. So then the butterfly effect or the ripple effect is actually rejecting that. It's not fate, it's not written in the stars, it's simple cause and effect that
Right.
you could conceivably, theoretically, you could trace it back to the actual cause of why that event happened, rather than saying it was fate that caused this to happen. It's the universe conspiring against me to cause this awful thing to happen despite my best actions. But he seems to be operating under the principle of fate because he
Hmm.
said this
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
But then here, notice that he doesn't say, if like you drop something into a pond, it'll have ripples, and this theory applies to it's. He says certain people have said that the world is
Right.
like a calm pond. Like, oh, that's a theory. He's not taking it on. It's not a belief that he has.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that is really interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, I did make the connection to, the butterfly effect and all that, but I didn't really have much else to say about that. But that is, a good point, bringing it back to the fact that Snicket has said that he basically believes in fate. And
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. And what's happening with the Baudelaires is fate. It's not cause and effect. It's
Hmm.
destiny.
Right.
Um, so, yeah. On page 6 at the top of the page, and you've got this quote from a great man. A great
Hmm.
man once said that right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. I did look it up. That's Martin Luther King Jr. who said that.
Uh-huh. Okay.
It's interesting when he doesn't give us the reference.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, he usually doesn't, and I think that's just because he's wanting kids to try to research,
Hmm.
uh, to try to go find out who said that, who wrote that, who is responsible for that thing. That it kind of makes the books a little bit more participatory, more than just
Hmm.
reading them. Then it encourages you to go and continue reading other stuff beyond that.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so he's got a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. there, and then the next one's on page 9, because you have another quote from, um, this is Kit who's speaking, towards the top of page 9, then she says, I guess I'll just start from the very top. She says, during intermission, I followed them to the snack bar and slipped them a box of poison darts before Esme Squalor could catch me. And she's talking about their parents in this case. It was difficult, but as one of my comrades likes to say, so a comrade, okay, to be daunted by no difficulty, to keep heart when all have lost it, to go through intrigue spotless, to forego even ambition when the end is gained. Who can say this is not greatness? And that is a Victorian writer, William Thackeray. I don't know anything about Thackeray, but it's one of those things. One of her comrades,
Right.
he's a Victorian. He's from the 19th century, so it's all over the place as always. And if anybody knows anything about Thackeray, like if you've done any kind of significant reading or of his work or research on him, then please drop a comment below, because I didn't have the time to really get into it, because if I follow every single one of these, it's all I'm going to be doing with my life.
Yeah.
Then on page 17 towards the bottom, then you have another reference to destiny here, right? That it goes from, it's actually a couple pages here, but it's referring to this Italian, I think, is it a play or is it I think it's an opera.
Yeah, I believe it is an opera.
La Forza del Destino, which is roughly translated as the force of destiny, but a little bit of research I did said that's not quite like how it's being used in Italian, but
Right.
La Forza del Destino is the force of destiny. And then towards the bottom of that page, then it well, it's a long sentence, so I'm not quite sure where to start reading. I guess I'll read from the middle of the page. It says, in the opera La Forza del Destino, various characters argue, fall in love, get married in secret, run away to monasteries, go to war, announce that they will get revenge, engage in duels, and drop a gun on the floor where it goes off accidentally and kills someone in an incident eerily similar to one that happens in chapter 9 of this very book. And all the while, they are trying to figure out if any of these troubles are the result of destiny. They wonder and wonder at all the perils in their lives, and when the final curtain is brought down, even the audience cannot be sure what all these unfortunate events may mean. So it comes back to destiny, and this chapter seems to be at odds with itself to some degree, because it begins by talking about cause and effect, and then it ends by saying, but maybe it's destiny, but it's a mystery.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot in this book in particular that like this as we get into chapter 2, that's about reflection, duality, everything about that, where it's when you've got Frank and Ernest who look identical, but one is the evil twin, so to speak. That I think that there's something to this idea of what is real, what is false, what is just the illusion, the reflection of life, and what is life itself. With the large pond in front of Hotel Denouement, and so I could see it being something along those lines as well, where he's pairing off certain people believing in the butterfly effect,
Yes.
and then others believing in destiny, because we do get a lot of dualism
Yes.
throughout these first 4 chapters at the very least.
Yes, I agree. There is a lot of it going on here. I'll keep thinking on that, because you're right. You're right. There's definitely a lot going on there, and I haven't fully thought through all of the implications of it. I guess I'll keep going then with chapter 2. On page 28, and I'm just skipping over the backwards writing. I figure you'll bring it up, but
yeah.
On page 28, then it says at the top of the page, there was a large scientific laboratory, but the volunteer who owned the place was murdered. There was an enormous cavern, but a treacherous team of realtors claimed it for themselves. And there was an immense headquarters high in the Mortmain Mountains. But okay, so we know about the Mortmain Mountains, right? So we know about VFD headquarters there. And then the large scientific laboratory, I'm assuming that it's Uncle Monty.
Mm.
Or do you
Yeah,
think it's somebody else?
I'm not sure. I was kind of puzzling over that too, and I had the same section marked. Um, yeah, laboratory is an odd
Agreed. He didn't
term to
really
refer
have
to
a
it.
laboratory in
Hmm.
um, the reptile room.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know what to call it, but other
Yeah,
than.
laboratory seems incorrect,
Hmm.
inaccurate at least to some degree.
Yeah, but certainly with the enormous cavern, um, with the treacherous team of realtors claiming it for themselves, uh, it reflects back on the wide window and Aunt Josephine,
Correct.
and presumably her irrational fear of realtors
Yeah, but the thing is
is
that
actually
like they
based
they
on this.
they coaxed her out of the cave by saying that if it's vacant, then realtors would be there to try to sell the cave, and
Mhm.
like they're just making it up. And then it's like, oh, apparently that was true. Is it anything they say comes true?
Well, I'm not sure if this is referring to the enormous cavern being Curdled Cave, which
Okay.
was from the Wide Window, or if this is supposed to be backstory on why Aunt Josephine has a fear of
Uh,
realtors to begin with.
okay. That could be.
Because that's how I read it.
No,
But
that could be. Um, on page 42, the middle of that page, then starting with the paragraph Aren't you coming with us? Klaus asked. I'm afraid not, Kit said. I have other errands to perform. While Quigley tries to resolve the situation in the sky, I will try to resolve the situation in the sea, and you'll have to resolve the situation here on land. Because you've got a whole bunch of different stuff going on. Uh, but just this whole land, sea, and sky, it is essentially a total war or
mm,
a world war. That
right.
is essentially the definition, like, of it. I mean, more or less. But when you're looking at, you know, I mean, uh, you can say that like often World War I is considered to be the first total war in that way, and total war means more than just land, sea, and sky. It means that like the entire all the countries involved, their entire economy is going towards the war effort.
Mm,
But it's just an example of this because World War I, they of course had airplanes, and then of course everything that was going on, like with the trenches, throughout France, and then on the Eastern Front as well, getting into Russia. But then all of like the Germans with their U-boats
mm.
attacking all of the vessels, bringing over supplies from North America to the Allies. That anyway, it's just as a reference back to that. But this idea that war is being fought everywhere, land, sea, and sky.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is interesting that, you know, uh, that once again, then we're getting this, this idea of there's so much more going on, even when the children feel like they have everything figured out. Then it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's still bigger than you.
yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. It's strange that he's pulling at new threads in book 12,
Hmm.
and that it's like it's not really about the Baudelaires. They're just a tiny part of this, and it's like, oh, okay, but it feels like he's making it so much bigger than we ever thought possible. But I mean, like if J.K. Rowling did this in like book 6 of Harry Potter, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that. Oh, by the way, there's this thing called Voldemort. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
there's this evil guy, and like here's the whole backstory that I'm gonna only tease you about. It's that we've got like these new things showing up in book 11 with that question mark thing in the sea, and you've got the man with no hair and a beard, and the I always
Mhm.
get it screwed up. The man with a beard and no hair, and the woman with hair and no beard,
Right.
that they seem to be extra villainous, extra evil. That I'm like, if this is so significant, uh, I'm not saying that you can't say, I'm going to tell a small story in a big universe, but it seems strange that we're just learning now that it's such a bigger universe than what we've been told. Like that, at least our impression so far.
Hmm. Yeah, it comes back to the the screenwriting advice or writing advice in general that is often given of, follow the most important character. And it keeps seeming like the Baudelaires are not the most important or interesting characters
Right.
within this. So why are we following them instead of, say, following Kit Snicket
Uh-huh.
or even, the Quagmires?
Yep.
And, you know, I mean, Lemony Snicket has made his bias clear of, you know, I am focusing on the Baudelaires because their story is important for some
Because,
reason. Yeah.
yes.
That he's just like, yeah, I don't want to tell the Snicket story. I haven't done enough research on the Quagmires. I'm only interested in telling the story of the Baudelaires for some
Right.
reason.
And that's what I'm saying is like if and I understand, but that it's not fair because they're doing different things and they're not even written for the same age group because Harry Potter's young adult and this would be middle grade. But if you look at what J.K. Rowling did with Harry Potter in comparison to what Handler has done with this, it's that we know exactly why we're focusing in on Harry, even when
Right.
Harry seems to be fairly insignificant, that it's just
Hmm.
he's the boy who lived, but people have attributed a lot more significance and powers to him than the fact like than what he actually has, that what he actually possesses. But
Hmm.
then he kind of grows into this role that is more than himself as the series goes on and we follow this progression, but he really is just kind of an ordinary wizard.
Right.
In some ways, if it weren't for the fact that Voldemort, some of his power ends up going into Harry and all of this. But I'm just saying that we know exactly the strengths and weaknesses of following Harry as our protagonist.
Hmm.
But this, we have no freaking clue why. We're in book 12 and we still don't really know the significance of our protagonists.
Right. Yeah, yeah, no, it is an interesting uh choice.
It is.
And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it other than yeah,
It's
it's
that's the thing is it's not bad writing because he's doing it intentionally, right? That
yeah.
it's not like this is incompetent, that he's just like whoops. He's doing this on purpose, but as far as the overall effect, I think it either works for you or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Um, that and you pointed out that these books are very much functioning as mysteries at this point
Yeah.
rather than comedies focused in on wordplay and all of this. And he's definitely going pretty deep into this whole it's a mystery. But I guess my point is a lot of mysteries don't function this way, though. You
Mm,
know as much information as can be revealed up until this point. But the problem is
right.
that we have all these characters who know the Baudelaires who know way more than what they're telling them. And that
Hmm.
just ends up feeling frustrating as a reader.
Mm,
In
yeah.
most mysteries, they meet somebody, that person tells them everything they know on the topic. So
Right.
then it's like we've exhausted that. We need to find another person. We've exhausted that. We need to reveal another clue, like discover another clue and all of that. But this, it's like you've got all these people who know like everything. They just
Yeah.
don't tell them.
Yeah. And I think that a large part of it is a sense of uh, authenticity to the story of the Baudelaires in terms of um, they they are just children in the huge world and
But what about the Quagmires? The Quagmires are already volunteers.
right, yeah, no, I yeah, like we certainly could have followed the Quagmires, and I think that that would have been very interesting to see that. But I think it's also partly that Lemony Snicket is very focused on Olaf and
Yes.
Esme, who
Yes.
are, important to the Baudelaires, but not
Yes.
important to the Quagmires.
Yes. Although maybe he should be.
Right.
Because isn't he kind of hasn't he been trying to go after them too? But
Yeah. Yeah. Not for as long, I guess, but yes.
That feeling when you write a book series and you accidentally introduce characters partway through who are more interesting than your protagonists. Whoops. I'm not sure, but how much I believe that, but anyway, it's a comment. It's an observation.
Yeah.
Do with it what you will. My last note, I guess, with chapter 2, although I might add one more, is on page 45. And this is the top paragraph on that page. So I'll just read from the top there where it says, but if someone is trying to hide their tears, it may also be noble to pretend you did not notice them so they will not be embarrassed. For a moment, the children could not choose between the noble activity of comforting a crying person and the noble activity of not embarrassing a crying person. But as Kit Snicket began to cry harder and harder, they decided to comfort her. And I just put that, yes, that is a good piece of advice in terms of comforting somebody. If they are trying to hide their tears and they're not drawing attention to it, and you can see that they don't want to be crying in front of you, and they are trying to control themselves, then it is really polite to essentially pretend that you don't notice.
Right. Yep.
But if they seem that they want some comfort and they're not really hiding it, then it's polite to comfort a person. And that's just a little piece of etiquette that is useful.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, absolutely.
All right. I guess I might as well bring it up now because I don't have a specific moment where I have it marked. But so they're working as concierges, but they're also supposed to be acting as flaneurs, right? And I don't know if you know the term.
No, just as far as I looked up as meaning, basically what you had said earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's a literary term, but it's specific to French literature, but it's more than a literary term. Like, it ends up being a particular type of character that you see in French literature in the 19th century. But then beyond that, it was like, sort of like, I guess the Victorian equivalent. And I mean, maybe this is wrong, but it would be more like a dandy, right? That a man who doesn't really need to work for a living, is concerned with fashion, spends his time in urban centers, like in the city, like with the burgeoning modern city, where cities, like, this is the Industrial Revolution, cities are becoming more and more industrialized, and there starts being a big difference between living in the country and living in the city, where you're starting to get more amenities available to you in the city that you just would not have in the country, and that he's an urbanite, right?
Right.
That,
okay.
But he's also acting in the role as being an observer of society. But the little bit that I did look up, so it does say that it's there's a connection to the poetry of Charles Baudelaire, spelled exactly the same way as their last name,
Right.
Beau, not Beau, like Beau, but Baudelaire, Bau. And so anyway, so I looked it up. So he's a French poet from the 19th century, and he also was a bit of a philosopher and an essayist and an art critic, etc. And he was also, and I think this is the connection, I think this is maybe why Snicket calls them the Baudelaires, and then gets them to act as flaneurs also, because he popularized the term in his poetry. But he was a translator, an early translator of Edgar Allan Poe, presumably into French. So it makes sense, though, that Baudelaire himself, the actual historical figure, was a translator of Poe, who was, of course, writing very dark, macabre literature, right? About very dark and creepy things.
Right.
So for this series, the aesthetic of Poe's stories makes sense. That's kind of the connection to Baudelaire, and then you get this extra connection with them acting as flaneurs.
Yeah, I knew about like I had looked up Charles Baudelaire before, but I had forgotten parts of that and didn't realize that he had worked as a translator for for pose work. So
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, by no means am I an expert on this at all. I'm just going with the little bit of research that I've done online, but I have no reason to believe that that's not true. So
Hmm. Yeah.
it's an interesting connection there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. All right. Uh, so I only have some quick notes here, and I'm going to go in reverse order. Page 35. The sugar bowl is referred to as the vessel for disaccharides. Uh,
Yeah, disaccharides.
yeah, which is just a type of sugar.
Yes, I know. I read that. Okay.
Well, you got to get that VFD in there somewhere, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, and then right on page 33, uh, this is pretty interesting. We got this discussion of, commonplace books and all that. Um, but toward the bottom of the page, then Kit says, "I've scarcely looked at these maps, poems, and blueprints that Charles sent me, or chosen wallpaper for the baby's room." Um, so Charles is an interesting uh, name there because we have seen a Charles in the series before, which was in The Miserable Mill, as Sir's partner.
Mm,
um,
okay.
yeah, and we get numerous references throughout here of people being part of VFD that we didn't realize or that we weren't told were part of VFD before.
Yeah.
Like as you had mentioned, like Aunt Josephine and possibly Uncle Monty, but even well, Uncle Monty, then we already did know from that. Yeah, like we've known most of them, but even like Hector from the Vile Village, and
Yeah.
he's referred to as being a
Like,
member of VFD.
doesn't this feel like retconning?
Somewhat to me, then it's more. It reminds me so much of, the idea of the Illuminati. All that
I guess.
conspiracy nonsense of, there's this wicked organization, or maybe they aren't wicked and they're just trying to keep the world, at peace or whatever. They're identifiable by an eye, and
Yeah.
um,
But for one thing, these are insignificant losers for the most part that we've met. How else would you describe Josephine and Hector?
uh, yeah, no, that's a fair point.
So, as far as them being significant members of this, crazy organization, then I'm like, well, I'm saying that it's retconning in that none of this feels earned. You're just retroactively changing the continuity essentially of the series where we go back and we look at this and it's like, but there was no evidence. And then if they were part of VFD, why would they not do something to help the Baudelaires along the way? Why were they just incompetent jerks who didn't help in any way whatsoever? If they're part of this organization that's to exist to stop figurative fires, then
Mhm.
figuratively speaking, the Baudelaires, their life has been on fire since their parents were presumably murdered by Olaf.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great comment. And I do think that there's Hector, for one thing, then he was, a very skilled inventor. He loved reading and all that, which is why the Baudelaires became such close friends with him. And he did try to save them from the village. He was going to escape with them in his own way, even though I think that living on a hot air mobile home sounds absolutely horrifying.
I stand by my original point that it is the creepiest thing ever. You will
Yeah.
live with me forever and ever and ever. Uh,
Yeah.
that is not rescue.
Right.
And
Yes.
why would he even be in that town to begin with? And he had been there for so long. I don't see how there was any sense of he was strategically placed there for the Baudelaires. It's like
Yeah.
now saying he's part of this organization. It's like, well, if somebody's part of this, you know what I mean? It's like if somebody's a superhero, why would they live such a pathetic life?
Right. Yeah, and with Josephine, then I'm not sure if it was actually her that would have been the member or if it would have been her husband Ike.
Fine.
But I, I'm trying to throw out some explanations here, and
No,
I
it's
should also
fine.
I should
Uh,
also mention that the Netflix series does a much better job of uh,
So
characterizing all of these.
I guess my point then would be when I'm saying that it feels like retconning, that's
Mhm.
just retroactive continuity. It's that
Yeah,
you start changing the way you have to read earlier elements of it, but there was no original plan to do that. You
right.
just say,
Yeah,
let's retroactively make that character somebody that they're not, or like
yeah.
change the significance of that event. It doesn't feel like he had a plan for this, that he was strategically placing these characters along the way and writing them as such. It's like it feels like he was just like, oh, okay, and that person's part of it. Why not?
Right.
Like a
Yeah.
pitch meeting. Just like, could they be part of it? Sure, why not? Have we seen any evidence that they were part of EFD? Nope. So they can still be part of it. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, no, I think that is fair.
Yeah.
All right, going back to page 26, another quick note here is just that Violet says, our parents took us to the Hotel Preludio, which is just fun.
Uh huh.
That's my only comment about it. And lastly, on the note of fun, is the beginning of this chapter, chapter 2, on page 19 with the backwards letters, the backwards slash upside down. No, not upside down, just backwards letters.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. I had fun with it.
I
Um,
figured you would.
yeah. And yeah, no, I don't know.
You don't find it irritating. You find it charming and whimsical.
There's a slight bit of irritation, but I kind of like the fact that you have to work at it in order to find meaning.
Yeah, I mean the only thing that I can say is I find, and I've done this before, like I've seen this type of activity done before, and that's specifically with working with children with disabilities when you're looking like with a kid with dyslexia, then
Mm,
saying, read this. Do you not see how difficult this is and how confusing it is? And you can get mixed up and going, oh wait, that's a B, that's not a D, or that's a P.
mm,
And to have far more compassion for students with learning disabilities
right.
than I've
Yeah.
done that. And I look at it and I'm just like, this is just, you know what I mean? Like to have that experience is not pleasant. It's
Mm,
just, I don't get much out of it. Like as a teacher, then it's useful. But
right. Yeah.
as a reader of these books, I literally just gave up partway through. I'm just like, I don't care.
Yeah, the only parts that like really bothered me is that I didn't know where the sentence was supposed to go when it's just
Yeah,
part of the line
you
that's
really have to,
backwards.
right? You just really have to work at it.
Yeah, that
I
I
guess,
didn't really like, but I've tried, reading upside down before and stuff like that, just to sort of challenge myself. So,
right.
yeah.
I guess it's fair to say that like I don't mind working at it. I guess my issue is more what's the payoff?
Mm,
What's the payoff for decoding this? Is it going to be
right.
worth my time? And ultimately, I'm like, it wasn't worth my time once I started reading through it. That I'm going, I don't think there's going to be something in here that's satisfying. So
Right.
I don't mind a puzzle if, but there has to be a payoff. But a
Gotcha.
puzzle
Yeah.
with no payoff, a puzzle with just ordinary prose, and you're like, great. So I don't mind the uh, like I don't know technique.
Mhm.
I don't like the actual content of it. It doesn't feel worth it.
Gotcha. Sorry, just need to shift here. All right, and so I guess I will keep going with chapter 3 then.
Yep.
Great. So my first note here is on page 54. This made me laugh because, okay, we have this segment here toward the bottom of the page. You must be the new concierges, he said. Welcome to the Hotel Denouement. I'm one of the managers. Frank, Violet asked, or Ernest? Exactly, the man said and winked at them. Um, so the only reason why this really made me laugh is because of how many times we've talked about, wait, when does this take place? Exactly.
Right. Yes.
It's same kind of thing there.
It
and
is
I really,
the same kind of thing.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
really do like the, how you're constantly kind of trying to figure out who it is, but also realizing that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So
The only thing that I like is I feel like this whole interaction with Frank slash Ernest is that at least with Violet's interaction so far, this is really good advice in how to get by in a modern office. It's when somebody says something that's just so weird and you don't know what to say, it's kind of best just to smile and nod. Don't say anything, and usually they'll be happy with that response.
right.
Do you know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
whole like, oh, she didn't know what, so she just said nothing. And then I'm like, yeah, like that's basically it. When you're dealing with a bunch of weirdos in the workplace, you just, sure.
Yep.
Just be very agreeable and just wait for them to move on.
Yep. Yeah, no, I have definitely had those moments.
Yeah, I think everybody has.
All right, hopping over to page 62. This is a great moment. Like this is just a whole description of how the hotel works, and I think that it's a great moment because it explains how the Dewey Decimal System works, which would be very helpful for children who most of them probably don't really know how the system works.
Agreed.
And I would say that probably most um, public schools have their libraries organized according to the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah,
So,
most public schools like elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. It's really not until college or university that you start seeing the Library of Congress. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I still don't know all the different levels, but
No, me neither. But I can kind of negotiate my way well enough. I'm a little bit better with Library of Congress because I worked at the library and university, but it's been a while, so I'm pretty rusty on it.
Yeah. All right, and then at the bottom of page 63, and this is interesting. The second story is the 200s for religion, and we have a church, a cathedral, a mosque, a temple, a shrine, a shuffleboard court, and room 296, which is currently occupied by a somewhat cranky rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the most direct reference that we've gotten to, any kind of church or
Yes.
various religions.
Absolutely. Something that I have been crying out for from like book 3 or 4 or something like that pretty early on in the series.
Yeah.
So you at least have a reference here to religion being something that exists within this community.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, he does what he does essentially every time he mentions anything about religion, because he just didn't mention it at all for the longest time. Then once he starts mentioning it, then he creates these equivalencies where he's saying this thing is just as valid. So a shuffleboard court is just as valid as a church or a synagogue. You know what I mean? Or a mosque or anything else, a shrine, a temple. Like it's just they're all equivalent. Just some people are really into shuffleboard. So that's the same thing as some people are really into Catholicism.
Well, yeah, I was also reading it as it's a sort of recreational activity where you do it in your free time, and it's just like, if you have time, then you go to church or whatever. But yeah,
it's certainly not a reverent attitude towards religion.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and then there's also the randomly a somewhat cranky rabbi. I'm not sure why he included that.
I don't know either, and I don't know if there's any significance to the number of the room.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure about that either.
296? I don't know. I can't think of anything.
Yeah. But if anybody does have any ideas about that, please let us know in the comments.
Yes, agreed.
And those were my only notes for chapter 3.
Okay, but I only had one note with chapter 3, and that was on the religion section.
Okay.
So I guess I'll go first. I do have a note on not a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So this should be obvious if you've been following our conversations at all, but it's just he is intentionally pointing out a change in point of view. This is not the first time that I've brought this up, that he's essentially been following the Baudelaires where we can only see events from their point of view, and that we don't have any chapters that are focused on, you know, Olaf and Esme or any other characters like that. And then he doesn't split up the Baudelaires until really late. I think it's the Hostel Hospitals when he first does it. And then what he does is he denies us a point of view of Violet, but then he gives us the point of view of Klaus and Sonny, because at least you've got the majority, you've got 2/3 of the Baudelaires. But then in the
slippery slope,
thank you, then they're split up, then Sonny's on her own, and so then what he does is they can kind of see to the top of the mountain, and Sonny can kind of see what's going on down below. So that's his way of trying to get around this whole thing of like, well, you're using a tight point of view on these characters, so really the only way that we as readers, because you've instructed the reader, the only events that we can see are events that impact the Baudelaires directly. We're essentially a camera being attached to them, following along with them. But now what do we do when they're split up? And now he's just like, they're split up.
Yeah.
And I really like it because, you know, and I am repeating myself, but from previous podcasts, but editors in publishing will not let you do this.
Right.
They just won't let you do this. It won't let you, like, I know what you're going to say is like, but, you know, Handler did this in the book. I'm going, he did it because he intentionally said they are in different places at different times, because that's exactly the question. Everything that takes place in not a chapter is a response to an editor saying you can't have them all be doing separate things simultaneously, because you've instructed the reader that we follow along with the 3 of them, and if you're going to split up, we can really only be attached to 2 of them. There has to be some kind of contrived reason why we can see what's happening to one of them who's not with the group. Then he's just going, this is all stupid. Just, they're split up. The reader's going to understand that they're split up.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that. Yeah. And on that note, I did also want to point out the, I forget the term for it now, but the 3 pictures at the top of Not a Chapter.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I can't remember the name for it.
Yes, you're right, because I should have caught that, but yeah.
Yep, it is telling a story, which is really interesting. This idea of getting, you know, 3 different points in time, perhaps, or at least 3 different perspectives on the same event. Something along those lines. All 3 have to do with an elevator.
Yes.
Yeah, whether it is drilling into the wall for some reason, looking at one of the cables which is nearly all the way severed, and then the person standing on the elevator pressing one of the buttons. So presumably the first picture is the person drilling in to sever the rope, and the third picture is the person who is about to fall to their death.
Yes. You're right. But yes, I forget the name, because we did get that description of the 3 pictures sequentially that then tell a story.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that that's interesting that it's, you know, prefacing the next 3 chapters, which are presumably all going to be telling one story, but in 3 different parts.
Yes.
And that you need to look at them all together in order to figure out what's really going on.
Right. Right. I guess I'll just keep going then with my notes for chapter 4. I've only got 2 of them. On page 85, I don't really have much to say with this other than Esme has got her sinoculars, and I just think it's a funny thing.
It really is.
I was hoping that the sinocular people would sponsor the podcast, but alas, they did not contact me. So
that is a shame.
yeah, I had it marked though, sponsor, because I really like sinoculars. It's a cool idea.
Absolutely.
And my last note is on page 89, where it started with the paragraph that says fetching. Fetching objects for people who are too lazy to fetch them for themselves is never a pleasant task, particularly when the people are insulting you. But as Violet walked back to the elevator and pressed the button for it to arrive, she was not thinking about Carmelita's atrocious behavior. I just have got a little note here just saying this is most sibling arguments. You not noticed this? Somebody's on the couch, and then another, sibling is like, "Hey, ugly, can you go get me that from the kitchen?" Like, you just called me ugly. Like, just do it already. You know what I mean? It's like, fetching objects for people who are too lazy to fetch them for themselves is never a pleasant task, particularly when the people are insulting you.
Yep.
How many siblings have experienced that? You have somebody else who's asking you to do something because they're lazy, and then they're kind of rude at the same time, insulting you.
Yep. Absolutely.
I feel like it's one of those little things of like, I think at that age, kids would appreciate that comment. They'd be like, right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That was my only insight into chapter 4.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have a few notes here. The first is on page 80 as well as 88, which is just the description of Esme's outfit, which is just horrifying to think about. At first, on page 80, when he says that there were just 3 large leaves of lettuce, I was like, really? Just 3?
Yeah.
I mean, even just for the front, and that's not a lot. But then, at least when she turns around, then we do see there were a couple of additional leaves. And I'm like, okay, well, that's better.
Yeah.
Still not great, but better.
Yeah.
That's my only comment on that. Just, okay.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting the way he describes Esme. Always. Mm-hmm. It's always kind of interesting the way he describes her.
Yeah, because most of the time then she is in somewhat of a symbolic outfit.
Yes.
Such as, when she was dressed as the fire.
Right.
Racing down the slippery.
Yeah.
But, yeah, here then it's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it, because on the one hand I'm like, it's not a great depiction of women, but it's just woman, because he has fine descriptions of other women in the series, so it doesn't seem to be like a habit that like any kind of consistency to it. Right. But it's just because she's it's just weird because Olaf is definitely a gross dude. You know what I mean? He's established that Olaf is just nasty, right, in a whole bunch of different ways. But Esme has been introduced as, fairly pretty and fashionable, even if like the fashion seems really odd. Mm-hmm. But he never gives her a compliment.
Right.
And it's like, because she's a villain or a villainess, then he has to, he describes it. He says the letters were painted to match Esme's sandals, which had long frilly straps that ran around and around the notorious girlfriend's bare legs like centipedes. Like, that's disgusting. Like, centipedes. Ugh.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
it's true.
Why? Like, to describe it that way, it's like essentially saying she's monstrous, but she doesn't seem monstrous. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've watched some you see images, little videos or photographs from European fashion shows where women and men are just wearing the craziest outfits ever.
Right.
But even I go, that's a weird outfit, but I wouldn't say like, ooh, it was like centipedes and it's
Right.
disgusting. I can't even describe it. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, yeah, it seems to be because of her character, then he
Hmm.
can't pay her a compliment
Right.
or
Yeah.
even describe her in neutral terms,
Right.
if not a
Yeah.
compliment. Yeah. Anyway, that's all that I had to say with that.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that is a good point. All right. My next note is on page 84, toward the top of the page. Uh, this is when Esme says, Carmelita has been a tomboy lately, she said, using an insulting term inflicted on girls whose behavior some people find unusual. And so I like the fact that he is bringing it up, mentioning that it is an insulting term, and that it's just, it's a different kind of behavior that some girls choose to, you know,
Yeah.
choose to embrace. That they tend to be more interested in stereotypically male activities, or
I,
some such. Yeah.
I agree. I like the fact that he says it's a term inflicted on girls whose behavior some people find unusual. It's
Hmm.
very careful in the way he uses it. There's really
Yeah.
no value judgment in there at all. It's just
Right.
some people find unusual. Unusual isn't
Yeah.
even bad.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I'd be curious about people's reactions to this. But to say that tomboy is an insulting term. Um,
That's true.
like
Yeah.
I mean, I've known lots of girls, and adult women who say, "Oh, I was a tomboy," or "I've always been a bit of a tomboy." Like it doesn't seem to be like, at least for many women, they don't see it as being
Yeah.
derogatory.
Yeah. I
I don't
think
have
that.
a problem with him saying it, but it's just I'm like, huh,
I think that it is more about the way that people say it than anything else.
yeah, that's fair.
But
That's fair.
yeah, and I think that there's yeah, because even the way that Esme phrases it um, isn't really derogatory in any way. She
No,
just says, Carmelita has been a tomboy lately, and then Geraldine is the one who says, "I'm sure your daughter will grow out of it," as
hmm
if it's something that it's like, "Oh, don't worry, she won't be like that for long," which
hmm
is um, that I think is more insulting than just referring to somebody as a tomboy.
agreed. Yeah, like there's
So,
nothing wrong with that, and so the idea that she needs to, or she should, or somebody should be happy that they grow out of it
mhm.
is that's the insulting part.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, on to page 87. This is just another instance of somebody being interrupted when they were just about to say the most important thing ever. Uh, Lurking around the basement, Geraldine repeated, but JS is Esme, Carmelita screamed from the swimming pool, interrupting at just the worst moment. I
Quel
literally,
surprise.
I didn't even reread that before saying it. that's that's actually really great. Because yeah, it really is at just the wrong moment.
Mhm.
But it is, yep, it's great that he's, uh, I mean, it's lampshading, but
It
it's,
is.
yeah, I appreciate it. Hello, Poe.
Yeah. I think it's just his ears making an appearance.
um, all right, and then my final note here is on page 92. Um, and this is, we get this interesting section, um, which is about, silence being golden. And toward the bottom of the page, if you are riding in a taxi, you might prefer silence so you can study your map in peace, but the occasion may require you to shout, "Please turn around. I think they've driven through those hedges." Um, which is a clear callback to earlier when
Yes.
Kit drove through the hedges. Um, and based on my reading of this, and I'm not sure about you, but it seems like it's Lemony Snicket who was following them.
Yes, I think you're right. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is. I just need to apologize if you are hearing weird noises because my cat is just insisting on taking a bath. I've tried to move him, but he won't. So that's what's going on here. We're almost finished. He couldn't wait though.
Gotcha. But yes, and so that'll do it for my notes for chapters 1 to 4, plus the not a chapter.
Yeah, plus the not a chapter. All right, yeah. So we are moving along, and I the only thing that I have to say generally about this is that I'm surprised that we're already at the Hotel Denouement.
Right.
I did not think that we'd be at the hotel already. I'm assuming that we're gonna stay here for the rest of the series, but that seems strange.
Yeah. No, I'm really curious as to your reactions to the rest of the series, because it is really surprising that we ended up at the Hotel Denouement already.
Yeah, like it seemed like the Hotel Denouement, even though denouement is a literary term meaning falling action, it seemed like that was going to be the climax of the series. But now it seems like it's going to be the penultimate moment in the series. That is not going to be the climax. That perhaps we're going to move on to a different location, and I wonder if it is going to be, dealing with whatever mysterious forces that are so much bigger than all of this that are going on with like that question mark thing and the sea and everything else. I don't know. I genuinely don't know, but I'm surprised. There's been multiple points in the series where I've been surprised, but we definitely, this seems to be a moment. Like, there's also many moments where it's pretty obvious where it's going.
Right.
In part because often Snicket just tells us directly what's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, he did give us, a hint as to what happens.
Somebody gets shot in chapter 9.
Yep.
It's not a hint. He just said somebody gets shot in chapter 9.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, well, we at least know what 2 of the next 4 chapters are going to contain.
Yes.
It's going to be following Klaus in the one chapter and Sunny in the other chapter, helping out as concierges.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so we know that too because he just told us.
Yeah.
All right. I guess this guy's really ready for me to be done. Well,
yeah.
At least make a proper appearance. Thank you so much for watching, and feel free to comment below, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Ignore the tattoo! A phrase here which means like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast across the web. That may seem like a strange definition, but in this context, it is entirely accurate.